Understanding the three different types of supervision. This chapter focuses on NHS England's three types of supervision, exploring the purpose and wider benefits of each type. We will look at what supervision is and why effective supervision is necessary. Let's start with some questions about the meaning of supervision. I will run through all three questions before inviting you to pause the recording to write your own notes for each. First question. What words do you think of when you think of supervision? Second question. Think of yourself as a supervisee or a learner. Reflect on your early days' experiences of supervision and how the supervision may have evolved as you progressed through your training. Third question. Think of supervision that you may have provided, both formal and informal. Maybe a quick chat in the staff meeting room with a supervisee, or a dedicated meeting or tutorial. Now you can pause the recording while you think and resume when you are ready to continue. In the exercise, you may have come up with some of the phrases you now see on the screen. The term supervision is very broad and will conjure up different images and memories for each of us. It's unlikely that anyone has not at least been supervised before, and I expect most of us at some point have supervised someone else as well. So we all have some understanding and recognition of what supervision means. Supervision can be defined as a mechanism used by professionals to interact, share, feedback, and learning, and consequently inform suggestions for improvement in practice and therefore patient safety. NHS England divides these into three main types of supervision, which we will now consider. In May 2023, NHS England published the guidance for primary care networks about providing good supervision to multidisciplinary team members. This forms the basis for this visual. A link to the guidance is on the bottom of this slide and in the resources section at the end of this chapter. It is worth a read and goes into much more detail in terms of the standards and recommendations for who, when, where, and how supervision should be being provided for each job role. The document was produced for PCNs as employers and therefore has a focus on the additional roles reimbursement scheme. But principles underpinning the guidance are transferable to any clinical role in primary care. We can divide supervision into three subgroups. In the first column, in green, we start with the primary staff member starting a new role in primary care for the first time. Initially, that staff member will require educational supervision. This is to support them reaching proficiency. It is time limited and ends when they obtain their full qualification or accreditation. Examples of this phase would be a pre-registration pharmacist or an FCP physio completing stage 2 of the roadmap to practice. The second orange column represents the need for ongoing day-to-day clinic support or practice supervision. This describes the need that all clinicians have to be able to discuss cases, get a second opinion or advice, and therefore ensure patient safety as a priority. This column tapers down over time because although no one ever graduates from the need for this, with time and therefore experience, confidence, the need for supervision decreases. For example, a new FCP physio might arrive in primary care and need to discuss each of their cases with a supervisor directly after or even during the consultation. Over time, they may begin to debrief their clinic at the end of the session. After accreditation, they might progress to an open door agreement, discussing cases on an ad hoc basis. Not all journeys will start and end at the same point in that progression, and this will depend on the job role, competence and experience of the supervisee, and this would be in agreement with their supervisor. The third pink column represents the oversight and support of someone's continuous professional development. In other words, professional supervision. Again, no one ever graduates from this type of supervision, but the recommendation from NHSE regarding R's roles is that this continues indefinitely, and I think the reasoning transfers really across the whole multidisciplinary team. The content and detail of someone's CPD is person to person, depending on their job role, their career stage, and their interests. And realistically, the amount of time they have for this will also vary significantly depending on their contract. But at the very least, all members of the multidisciplinary team have a responsibility to keep up to date in their practice by engaging in CPD, and someone needs to have some oversight of this happening. The guidance linked at the bottom of the slide has a useful table, which helps to lay out, per job role, what would be appropriate in terms of professional supervision of the different R's roles. A couple of things can crop up when we start to talk about these three types of supervision, which I thought would be worth clarifying. Firstly, you might recognise that during the pre-accreditation phase, there is a lot of overlap between educational and professional supervision. It could be provided as an all-in-one in many scenarios and does not need to be distinguished between, as long as the objectives of both types are being met. Second, you might have noticed that the second and third columns have the words clinic and clinical greyed out in their titles, and that I've tried to avoid using those terms. I've included them here because that's how the document is presented. But the reason I'm avoiding using those terms is that it can cause confusion and conflation of the two. Thirdly, professional supervision is just an oversight. Professional supervisors don't need to be providing all the CPD, but just overseeing that it's happening. For example, again, an FCP physio might be doing their non-clinical contact time to do a prescribing course. They are a fellow on the Training Hub scheme. They attend monthly FCP workshops in the borough and use the remainder to stay up to date with online modules. Their supervisor needn't provide any of this, but overseeing that the CPD hours are meaningful, checking in perhaps for an hour a month, and providing support and guidance when required. Now that we've defined supervision into the three types, the why might become a lot clearer in our minds. The what are we trying to achieve question is becoming answerable. So, educational supervision. Educational supervision is about helping a person to transfer skills into primary care to ensure standards are being reached before a person reaches a recognised qualification, and thus ensure clinical safety and standards going forwards. So good educational supervision looks like understanding what capabilities someone is arriving with, understanding what skills they need to obtain, assessing whether this is being achieved, and being able to provide training or flag a problem if it isn't. Let's have a think about practice supervision. This is about patient and staff safety. So good practice supervision looks like being accessible in real time with as few barriers as possible between the supervisor and supervisee. Barriers could be geographical, about time management and scheduling, or even about trust and respect and practice culture of asking for support. And lastly, let's have a think about professional supervision, which is the broadest. On one end, it's about supporting a person to develop their career, which ultimately benefits their patients and colleagues and improves their job satisfaction. On the other end, it's about noticing when things aren't going well, being that safety net, checking that a person is up to date with mandatory training, checking that they are just generally okay, and offering support if not. Good professional supervision looks like knowing a person, having the opportunity for protected time, being familiar and trustworthy, and a staff member feeling valued. Reflect on your current place of work or learning environment, or even your own practice as a supervisor. List what you are doing well already and take a moment to list what you could do differently to enhance your current offer. You might find it helpful to think about possible barriers to creating the ideal plan for supervision, then what might be required to overcome those barriers. If you have not already identified a quality improvement project or PDP for your supervisor role at work, why not consider picking just one barrier or action from your list and turn it into a project or PDP for your learning environment? This is also a useful exercise as part of showing leadership and safe practice for CQC. Please feel free to pause the recording now and resume when you are ready. Wider benefits of effective supervision for patients, supervisees, and the whole team. Take 2 to 3 minutes to think about the possible benefits of supervision for each of these groups. Please pause the recording while you think and resume when you are ready to continue. Let's take a look at some possible suggestions of answers for each of those sections. Is there anything on these lists that you had not thought about? The purpose of supervision can go beyond addressing the needs of the supervisee and the patient. If done effectively, it can also enhance the sense of psychological safety within the teams of the whole learning environment. So to summarise what we've covered in this chapter, we have defined supervision generally and considered the 3 types of supervision. You have considered the purpose of supervision and how you might improve effective clinical practice supervision where you work. Take a moment to think about what you would like to revisit at the end of this chapter or explore in more detail. What will you do differently because of what you've learned in this chapter?